Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Unstuck Pod. Really excited today to have Dennis Bruce here. And rather than me, butchering his background and his journey, I'd love, Dennis, if you could introduce yourself and share with everyone more about, your journey, what you're doing, and let's go from there.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jamie. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. And I'm Dennis Bruce. I'm founder CEO of Tangonet Solutions. We're based in Atlanta and in Argentina, where we have our technology teams. And Jamie mentioned something about my journey. My journey started in Boston, Massachusetts, where I grew up, lived there until my mid 20s, worked. My initial technology professional career was mostly, well, it started in Wang Labs back in the glory days of the mini computer, talking about early to mid 80s, and worked as a QA analyst there, integrating Wang and IBM systems. And then I got one of those phone calls from out of the blue. At one point around 1986, I found myself working at the UN in Geneva, Switzerland, because I had a somewhat unique skill set that I knew how to integrate Wang systems with IBM systems. This was in the day pre APIs and all that sort of thing. So you had to cobble together a lot of different tools and platforms in order to get systems to talk to each other. So that's where I come from. And at the UN, I worked there for several years, integrating different systems, mainly Wang and IBM, for the purposes of field communication to sort of, let's say, emulate a telex, let's say, by using an email front end. So that was
For those who
that was
don't
a
know about, sorry, Dennis, I don't mean to interrupt you. For those who don't know what a telex is, could you maybe share that part too?
Yeah, so I don't even know if I know what a telex is, to be honest with you. I saw that machine that they use in the telecommunications unit, and they were like, well, what they were really doing was they would be retyping in these word processing documents that would be sent over for communication with field offices. This was the refugee organization with some very highly sensitive, highly critical information that was going back and forth from UN headquarters to the field offices. It just took an extraordinary amount of time because of the repetitive work that had to be done. The word processing document would be created, be printed, it'd be sent in interoffice envelope to the telecommunications section. And the telex machine is just this big thing that, you type in, like it's, I think, the precursor to a fax, you could say. It's for sort of digital communications, but very asynchronous, very, let's say, I remember they were using X25 networks back in the day, but basically it was a way of many years ago of communicating effectively via digital means, you could say. Okay. So we streamlined that process, got it up. And then around the early 90s, I found myself again through another one of those phone calls. I found myself working in Argentina in different development efforts. Firstly, privatizations, which is basically taking a state-run company, in this case telecommunications, and converting it to a private sector company, a more, let's say, commercially based and viable company. And my role there was to manage large-scale IT investments as part of that transformation. So that was that. And I later worked again in Argentina, or still in Argentina, in different turnarounds with a large retail group, retail and property management group. It was more of a technology turnaround than a business turnaround, just replacing all of the old and putting in the new.
Mhm.
And privatizations again with the airports. The airport privatization, they privatized the whole network. And again, it was a lot of this recurring theme is just reinventing, helping companies reinvent themselves through the implementation of technology. Those that are undergoing transformations. Privatization is a transformation. In the case of the retail property management, that was a transformation of sorts, technology and culture as well. And the UN was a transformation also in that sense, to get out of the old mindset of, we have to do this via telex and we have to do a very cumbersome process where there are refugees sitting in a field, somewhere that need very extensive and critical, in many cases, healthcare interventions that have to be airlifted out of war zones and into places where they could get that care. And a lot of times that these communications it was a life and death situation. So minutes, seconds count, and when you're, talking about communications, sometimes takes days from source to destination. We were able to fortunately make an impact there. So it was quite gratifying to see some of the the improvements there. And then beyond that, when I founded Tangonet, it was a lot of the same thing in the early 2000s or mid 2000s. It was finding companies that were going through transformation, or startups, or something that was mergers, something that was a transformative effort that was undergoing in the company as a result of some transformational change in the company, and putting the technology pieces in place to accompany that transformation. And sometimes accompanying means to be the sort of the trigger for the transformation, or sometimes the sort of leading edge of that transformation. But there's always some component of cultural change, of adaptation, and transformation that goes just beyond the technology itself. The technology is only one piece, and many times it's the easiest piece.
Yeah, so actually, I don't want to interrupt you, but I feel like it's a great segue into what is a transformation that is occurring on a massive scale, like way beyond just the technology in any one company, and kind of tech transformation that is impacting every company, or I think every company, but certainly I think about SaaS companies, and that's AI, and where AI fits into this, and what is that doing for you? Because you've been on the leading edge of being part of this in a variety of ways. What's happening in your business, or what are you seeing related to that now?
We're seeing a lot of things, Jamie. It's a loaded question, and from our business, I'll start with our business perspective. But, what we're seeing is we're seeing major disruption in terms of the services that we provide. And part of our business, about 40% of our business, is software development, custom software development for our clients. And that's undergone some major shifts in terms of, first of all, a lot of clients can do this stuff themselves, because the productivity enhancements with tools such as Claude Code and Opus, they're such that, the traditional bottlenecks and competing priorities and limited skills, or limited, let's say, internal teams, limitations of their teams, because there are just so many priorities, so many projects going on, has now been, let's say, reduced to a certain extent thanks to these tools. And we have clients that tell us that, right? So we know that because they tell us that. And we know that, from our own usage of these tools, that, we can do a lot better, faster, if it's done right. And there are ways to do it right, and there are ways to do it wrong. So that's one thing. It's, the business aspect of it is that we are seeing disruption. We are sure where the new value prop is evolving, right? So we have to evolve with that. We have to see, like, where do we provide value in this new age of AI and AI assisted software development? So that's like, we're right in the middle of that storm right now, repositioning that. And then I think from what we've witnessed, from what we've seen, we've seen a little bit of everything. Our teams, for example, we've seen code that we have to integrate as part of a project, a client project that comes from somebody else. It comes to us. We have to do the integration piece. But we see that what we're integrating into has not been, let's say, it's been, or I would call it, allowing the inmates to run the asylum, in the sense that if you rely 100% on Claude Code and you don't do the proper code reviews, if you don't have the proper engineering governance around the software development, then it can go off the rails. And it doesn't matter that it compiles correctly. Is it fit for purpose, functionally? And we've seen that, yeah, it all looks right. It's structured right. It compiles correctly, but functionally speaking, it's not fit for purpose. You might as well just throw it away. You've just created a load of technical debt, which is another aspect of this. You can create what we've discovered, what we've seen and witnessed and read about, with other case studies from other, looking at some of the industry topics on this issue, is that you can create massive amounts of technology debt if you don't govern the AI development properly. And, we position our services to help companies overcome technical debt, but we're also seeing that technical debt is being recreated, and on a massive scale even. So it's a problem, and one of the things that, we're looking at, believe it or not, is we're looking at positioning some of our services to say, well, we can help you overcome the massive technical debt you've created based on allowing Claude Code to run, let's say, to run the shop, to run the show, we're not going to put it in those terms, but I mean, this problem is starting to appear. So there are several, those are some aspects of it, that we're seeing: creation of technical debt, the lack of guardrails around the development process, the lack of engineering, let's say the human in the loop type of thing, which I think is important, especially for the more complex initiatives. But there's also been some really cool stuff. We've helped develop, some of the smaller language models that are more like, think of a chat GPT or a Claude, but more concentrated within a company, building that model that is, let's say, the internal intelligence of a company, that very interesting project. So, and very sort of, let's say, in terms of productivity, it's just amazing, what can be done. But it needs rules, it needs governance, it needs a culture of understanding what the capabilities are on the one hand, but
Yeah.
being able to do it properly with the right guardrails on the other.
So when we start to talk about there's technical debt, like oftentimes when I work with companies, I get into conversations with them about, you have an idea, you've got some stuff, things are going, and you often run, like you're often running. And so from a business point of view, they haven't thought it through, or things have changed so much over time that they haven't thought it through. And so they kind of jump ahead, and there's a lot of inefficiency and friction. Okay. So that happens. What I hear from you is I hear something similar when you're describing this situation. Okay. So I hear this from a technical point of view, which could be part of it anyway, but even from a building product and what product means, I see a lot of companies doing that as well. What I'm trying to understand as we talk about this is, I know that all that friction and all those challenges from a business perspective are fixable. It's all fixable. It can all be corrected, and it can be corrected relatively quickly. You're jumping in when someone has done some of this work, and you can correct it to a point, right? So all of these things, what I want to know is how far down the path have we gone, or are we going toward transformation or adjustment or change or disruption, as you called it, that it can't be fixed. You go too far, can't be fixed. It's going to be a real problem. Like, so there's easy to fix. And then there's the bigger stuff. People are talking about things like SaaS apocalypse. It's like, is that the case, or is it just about finding a happy place between the two is where I'm trying to go?
I think that it's a combination of things. You mentioned SaaS apocalypse, Jamie. We're seeing now that companies are doing it. We were recently at AI Week here in Atlanta a couple of weeks ago, and a company had this use case of a company. One of their clients had a very well-known CRM in place, but they found that well-known CRM, as functional as it was, didn't cover all the functionality that they need. And this company went in and they said, well, okay, do you know what you need? Do you have some user stories built or whatever? And, they went in, they essentially reproduced what already existed in the current CRM, and they bolted on these new use cases from the company and essentially just rebuilt the system new with these new use cases and built a new CRM as a result. In a matter of, I don't know if it was days or a couple of weeks or something like that, but an incredibly short period of time. And I think, if you look at that, I think that what could happen out of that, if that's any indication of a trend, right, is that the SaaS apocalypse thing goes from one to many to maybe one to one or one to a few, where you start building these very, very highly customized solutions for companies. That is what really breaks the traditional SaaS model, let's call it, right? Where that one to many, and you're just, everybody has their own version of a SaaS application. We're going back to this. Maybe you could even look at it as going back to, the pre-SaaS days, where we were building, very specific products for maybe a specific market, but, there was maybe more custom or more customized solutions. Now we have, before, 30 years ago, when we talked about ERPs, we could count them on one hand. Now there are multiple ERPs for every vertical. So
Right.
it's that type of thing, how that's proliferated over time. So are we going back to a more specialized way of developing, thanks to AI, that is very, very highly customized to a specific client and specific use cases, that is let's say, much more attractive than something out of the box that comes, from a SaaS provider. And I think maybe that's part of SaaS apocalypse. I think that's part of it. I think that there are certain areas where, where I think SaaS is going to live and thrive and, in some very highly specialized cases. But I think there are other cases that there will be this sort of disruption in the SaaS model, maybe not a SaaS apocalypse, but something that's going to, let's say, alter that model in a way that's going to be very noteworthy. Yeah, if that is an example, like I said, if that maybe is like a trend that's happening, I can really see that. I can really see people, this buy versus build discussion that we've had for years, decades, do you buy, do you build, now takes on a different meaning, you
Yeah.
know, it takes
So I
on a sort
actually,
of,
no, go on, go on. No, I don't mean to interrupt you, Dennis.
no, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah. I was finishing the
I was
thought.
I was gonna say, but what I was gonna actually ask you about that is, so so I'd like to know, you deal with CEOs of companies, of SaaS companies all the time. And so the question to me becomes, what's their role in this? Are they helping? Are they like, how do they view it? Because it's their baby. They've been doing things a certain way. They have a product. They have to evolve and go to these other places. They've also been given technology that is incredibly powerful, could open up more doors. So what are you seeing from those folks in terms of the decision making and their approach? And are they helping or hurting, or what's your observation?
Yeah. So a couple of things, so for our existing clients, we're seeing, a very definitive move into saying, okay, using AI tools is a must. It's not impacting, let's say from, our business. It's just, we're doing that naturally. I talked to a CEO this morning and she told me, she said, yeah, our team is using, her team was using Chat GPT internally. And I said, well, ours is using Claude Code. We're doing the front end work, their team's doing the back end work, and then they come together and they integrate. And I said, maybe there's something there that we should be, let's say aligned, and just sort of as maybe a best practice. Let's use one tool, for both, and that type of thing, just as a means of just standardization, best practice, that type of thing. The other ones are, like I mentioned earlier, there are some clients that, they will say, look, we understand that you can do this, in a 3-month project and, 10-week sprints or whatever it is. But I think some of these greenfield projects where somebody just needs something built from scratch and it lives outside of their core systems and that type of thing, that lends itself pretty well to, and the requirements are very well defined. That lends itself very, very well to just an AI development effort that maybe before we would have
Yeah.
done, but now they would do it internally, that type of thing. So we have to pick our battles. You have to see, where we add value then there's another case of, like talking to a CEO last week who we built a solution for, an AI specific solution for, and he loves the solution. It's very innovative in terms of, this small language model and having the intelligence, like that's within the borders of a company. And he's like, I love what we built, but I don't know what to do with it. It's a like sort of a product. He said, do I take it to market? Do I just use it internally? It's given me, enormous productivity gains in general, but is there a market for this? So it's all over the map, Jamie, of what we've seen, from standardizing on
Yeah.
tools to, determining what to do from a market perspective to, like, let's say, do we use you or do we just do it ourselves? That's always been a question, but now there's, with the productivity enhancements, there is some things that are going in house these days, So yeah, we understand that. And it evolves so fast that, I don't know, what's it going to be? 6 months ago, I would have given you different answers, I think.
Mhm.
6 months from now, I may give you different answers again. I don't know.
No, and I think that's
No,
a totally fair way to look at it, talk about it, because it's weekly, right? It's changing so
yeah.
fast. So okay. Let's do this. So this is in the context of where things are headed and what you've seen. And you've seen stuff that you talk about systems. We started off talking about telex. Like, think about where we're shifting, where we've shifted to. What advice would you give to CEOs of companies that are obviously where technology is core to what they're doing, but it's more about application, not necessarily about building the technology, in terms of how they think about this, the approach they should take, and what is best in your mind for their business going forward?
Yeah. So, insofar as AI, okay, here's what I will say: there is I a huge demand, and I only say huge demand because just judging by the inquiries I get and the people I talk to, CEOs and others, that ask the question, can you or do you know someone who can help us look at our processes internally to see how and where we can apply AI effectively? That's a really good question. If CEOs are asking that question, that's the right question to ask, because there are lots of AI solutions that just don't provide the results, or based on the expectations that they had in their proof of concept, MVP, or whatever. And I think people are beginning to realize now that it's not just a question of throwing Claude code at it. And people talk about creating 60,000 lines of code in 3.5 minutes. I say to that, who cares? It's
Yeah.
irrelevant. I don't care how much code you may have just created. Those 60,000 lines might be the equivalent of 3 years of technical debt. Who knows? Right. So I think we need to get away from the vanity talk about, how much code you can create and all this sort of thing, and start talking about, where and how I can look internally at my processes and see, today, where can I get the most bang for the buck, and just start small, but start small but think big at the same time, right? In terms of, but the important thing there is to understand the process. We talk about business analysts, these AI analysts, that the ones that understand the capabilities of AI, but also have the understanding of how to map business processes, how to analyze that to determine, here is your opportunity. And here is how we can define the value proposition. And here is how we can define the return on investment. I think that's the way to look at it. Don't look at it, don't get carried away by Claude Code or ChatGPT or Codex or Gemini or whatever. Don't get carried away by, and don't get carried away by the vanity of how much code you can produce. That's, in my mind, that's nonsense. Think about, where, internally you feel the most pain, where the processes are either broken or inefficient or whatever, and start thinking about, how can we best analyze it, whether you do it yourself because the people that are on the front lines of those processes know them the best, or whether you bring in somebody to help as a let's say a phase zero of the process, and then start thinking about the tech and the technology solutions and so forth.
All right. Well, in the spirit of bringing in somebody who can help, where can people find you? Can you let them know where they can find you,
Yeah, you
reach
can
you?
find me. Please, connect with me on LinkedIn. I think we'll be sharing our contact information here, Jamie, if that's possible,
Yeah.
by
Yeah,
email.
yeah, sure.
If there's anything, that we can help either through our network, we're starting to build these relationships with consultants and others who can help map processes, because we see that as an important phase zero of all this AI implementation. But yeah, LinkedIn, email, phone, all of that, contact information. Dennis Bruce, Tangonet Solutions. Happy to talk, and if we can help in any way, happy to do so.
Well, Dennis, thank you so much. And to everybody who's watching, listening, appreciate it. And until next time.
Thanks, Jamie.